start here. The kidnapping of the 4 Moti brothers in Limpopo last year dominated headlines until their equally dramatic release in a remote area in the dead of night 3 weeks after their kidnapping. The parents appealed for privacy to help the boys heal from their trauma at the time. But now the family has gone to court and stopped police from interviewing the boys altogether. So can parents prevent police from speaking to child victims, citing trauma as a reason? And are police actually able to conduct such interviews correctly and sensitively? Let's speak now to clinical psychologist, author and former police profiler, Professor Gerard Labuschagne. Prof, thanks so much for your time. So I wonder if you could talk to us about the process that should be followed when police need to interview minor victims of trauma about their experiences. Are there clear guidelines?
Well, you will usually need, the parents' permission or consent to interview the children, unless there's a court order instructing it to take place. Unless, of course, the family, the father is, or the mother is, for example, the offender, like you might get in sexual offences cases. The question as to whether the police are properly trained, I don't know how well the talks might be trained in interviewing children. But, of course, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Units detectives will be trained to interview children who are victims of crime. The police do have forensic social workers who are quite often used to interview victims of crime and take their statements. And, of course, the police does have psychologists who do forensic work, for example, for my old unit, the investigative psychology section, which can also be used. So I do think there are people available there who are trained and qualified to actually interview children. So the question would be, if trauma was the only reason that they're giving why they don't want the children to be interviewed, well, I think there are solutions that go around that, but there might be other reasons why they don't want the children to be interviewed.
I mean, that's of course, a great speculation. So, for example, if these children were threatened with harm by their kidnappers, either, you speak to the police after we release you and we're going to take it out on your parents, or we'll come and get you, wouldn't that make the debrief process by the police almost impossible to conduct for these children without further trauma?
Yeah, well, look, I would definitely, threats made directly to the children prior to their release. But I can almost guarantee you that if this was some form of negotiated release between the kidnappers and the parents, there was most undoubtedly part of that agreement would be that you don't cooperate with the police to try and catch us afterwards. Otherwise, we'll come back again and we'll kidnap another family member. So, if I was a parent, I would abide by that. If that was a condition of my children being released, within a heartbeat, I would agree to that. So I think we really need to actually just respect the parent's decision, whatever it might be founded upon. If it's founded upon, an incorrect assumption that the police don't have appropriate people to interview them, I think the police should try and address that. But ultimately, if it is a different reason, we have to respect it. I don't think it would necessarily majorly hamper the police investigation. I don't think the kids would probably have a lot of information that could lead to the arrest of this whole syndicate. And if the police are saying we have nothing and therefore we need to interview these children, then I think that's a very clear message that they don't have anything out of their investigation. The children would have limited information that they could potentially offer to the police anyway, in my opinion.
One of the things that Barry Bateman was saying to me a little earlier is that there was an outside company brought in to handle these hostage negotiations. So the police in many ways may have been sidelined, and as you say, it does suggest possibly that this might be their only way of getting information. Do you think that the police, despite having ramped up some units to try and deal with this, it's seemingly increasing cases of kidnapping, are up to the task?
Yeah, look, I always like to say there's two parallel processes. You've got the police's investigation into a kidnapping, and then on the side, parallel to that, is that you have the negotiations with the kidnappers to get the children back. And they both have very different functions. The police can do both. You have very competent police negotiators who can do the negotiation, and their job is to talk until the children or the hostage is released. And you have the investigators on the other side who are obviously trying to find out where the kids are prior to release, or the victims, and of course trying to catch the suspects before or after release. And those are in a way sort of two different competing processes. And again, it's totally understandable that a family who has managed to get their victim back, their hostage back, is not going to want to kick the hornet's nest and make the suspects now think that you are then trying to catch them afterwards.
The family, of course, has been criticised for not helping. To your knowledge, has there ever been a case where parents have interdicted the police from interviewing children who were witnesses or part of a crime case in any way? And do you think it sets a dangerous precedent?
I'm sure there have been. I mean, I don't personally know, but that's, again, my limited experience with the kinds of cases that I was working on. The court granted it, so it's not against the law. They have an interdict from the course that was granted, so clearly it's not an unlawful interdict. I don't think it sets a dangerous precedence. You still have to convince the court why it is so necessary for you not to be interviewed by the police or whatever it is that you're asking the court to interdict. So the courts will always be the gatekeeper of deciding whether this is a valid request after having heard evidence presented. I don't know whether the police will have an opportunity to come back later with their own counter argument. But the courts will always be that gatekeeper, and I think that should be that it might be situations where that is necessary. So it's not something we should try and prevent. But I also just want to say, I think a lot of families and people out there should actually just butt out of the Moti's business. You're not the ones who went through this. It's very easy to sit on your couch eating peanuts and saying, well, they shouldn't do this or they shouldn't do that. You have no idea what happened to them. You have no idea what they went through, and you don't know what's happened in the background. So stay out of it. It's none of your business, really.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a lot of public comment today criticizing the parents, but also people criticizing the police, saying that the police were absolutely useless. Barry making the point earlier that the police have actually made a number of breakthroughs just in recent weeks around kidnapping cases. You are a parent, but you're also a former police officer. Where do your sympathies lie? Do you feel for the police or for the parents?
I was trained as a hostage negotiator in the police, and I worked on these types of cases in my time in the police and quite a few afterwards. I'm always for, the main thing is we need to get the hostage back as safely and quickly as possible. The rest, quite frankly, is details. Yes, of course, on a bigger level, you want the police to try and make headway to catch these individuals, to prevent it from happening again. There have been, as you said, some small breakthroughs. I don't think it's really breakthroughs on these big cases where you see people being kidnapped for months for incredibly high value ransom demands. I think they haven't really cracked those syndicates. They might have been making some achievement on just sort of lower level people performing these type of activities. So I think in a way one can have a bit of healthy skepticism as whether the investigation process, will there ever be major successes, and will we stop this crime through the investigation process? What we do know is if you talk to the suspects, you'll get your victim back. So for me, I always say, to the families out there, put your energies into talking to these people to get your family member back. The catching part, it's unlikely it's going to happen while your child is still in their custody, and it's very unlikely that it's going to happen after your child has been released. So you do want to make sure that you're talking with the right people to the right people.
As we head into 2022 and we saw an increase of these types of kidnappings, you look at crime patterns, you look at worrying crime trends. Do you think that we are in for more of the same? Are we in the grips of a number of highly sophisticated syndicates that see this works and are going to continue?
Oh, absolutely. This is not going to stop. It's not going to stop because you're not making major headway into catching the people on an upper level that are involved. Remember, there's different levels of people that are involved. The people snatching the person, people looking after, the people who are negotiating with the family, and, of course, the people behind the scenes who are driving all of this. I don't think we're going to see major arrests and prevention of this type of crime. And what's more worrying, besides these professional syndicates who are most likely, based overseas, it's believed that you're starting to see the cash and transit offenders who are now, feeling the heat of cash and transit robberies, moving over into this very lucrative business. And it's a business, and as long as people make lots of money, and they do make a hell of a lot of money for low risk, it's going to continue. And I said, my biggest fear is we're going to get these chancers who are not professional. And there you have a greater chance of physical harm towards your kidnapped victim, potentially being murdered by the suspects because they feel this is too much of a risk, or they've gotten their money and they kind of just want to bolt with it. But yeah, I don't really see us. If you look back to the Omar Karim case in 2016, no arrests have been made there. The Shiraz Gattu case a year or two later, the big cases that have happened in Cape Town, the Moti case, there's never been arrests in these big cases. So there's not really an incentive to stop doing it, and you make a lot of money doing it.
All right, thank you very much. Not a very encouraging message, but an important one to hear nonetheless. Clinical psychologist, author and former police profiler, Professor Gerard Labuschagne. Let's